Good day. I'm Wayne Duvenage, the CEO of OUTA, and joining me today in this discussion is Rudie Heyneke, a senior project manager at OUTA, been with us for a number of years, doing excellent work in uncovering corruption and maladministration. And we want to discuss a very, very important issue. It's taken a long time to get here, but last week in Parliament at the Portfolio Committee on Higher Education, some of the good work that you've been doing in the past is starting to come to fruition. And I think what we're seeing is a Parliamentary Portfolio Committee that's doing the work that we've always wanted Parliament to do in the projects that we undertake, is to hold the executive to account. And that seems to be happening. But before we get to that grilling at the services SETA, now this is specific around higher education and the SETAs. What are the SETAs? I think for our viewers, SETAs are the sectoral education and training authorities. There are 21 of them, we know, and all the skills development levies that everybody who gets a paycheck knows what that's about. Everyone who runs a business pays over to SARS, goes into this pot. And its intention is good, to spend money on the upliftment of skills of the youth, to get people prepared for jobs. Excellent work can be done and should be done there. But over the years, we've seen, and in this specific project, we've seen how those funds are plundered, literally, are manipulated and are misspent and grossly mismanaged for nefarious activities most of the time, or a lot of the time. So, Rudie, let's go back to when did this investigation, how did it start into the services SETA? What did you find out? And let's take it from there.
Yeah, thank you, Wayne. This Werksman's report that was discussed by the Portfolio Committee last week with the leadership of Services SETA, Werksman's investigated a few contracts, and those specific.
Why did they investigate? Who instructed them to investigate?
Let me go back into history somehow, and I'll tell you how it came about. Now, those specific contracts that were looked into by Werksman's was reported to OUTA back in 2018 by 3 brave whistleblowers that came to our offices and told us about irregularities and procurement irregularities that happened on several tenders that were awarded at that time. What we did then as OUTA is we launched a PI application. We requested the access to this information. Services SETA denied us the access, and we had to go to court. And only 2.5 years later, we got the actual documents.
2.5 years.
2.5 years. So everything stood still for 2.5 years.
My goodness. And this is stuff that we should know as the public. When we want information about how our money is spent, this is not stuff that you should expect to fight for. If a government department is being run properly and transparently, they should say, sure, here's the information that you're looking for. It's not a secret. We weren't asking for trade secrets. Eh?
Absolutely. You're 100% correct. And that information is all about, the evaluation processes, who were the tenders, who were the bidders, who was successful, what happened during the evaluation process. But now with the Werksman's report out,
but tell us what you found out then.
Yeah, but now we know why they didn't want to give us that information. But let's go back to the 2.5 years that we had to wait. Only then we could start to dig deep into those tenders. And we found the first one that we looked at was the Grace and Reed tender, where this service provider had to provide biometrics and a monitoring system for Services SETA. Services SETA paid 166 million rand for that.
166 million rand.
And I think the mind-blowing thing about that is that Werksman's found that they could never see that equipment was delivered to Services SETA.
Wow.
So, and the next two contracts that we investigated was all about branding and printing services. And what we found there was that the same people, the same company, they was awarded 3 back-to-back tenders for the same thing for a period of 3 to 4 years. And that company and those individuals, they pocketed 300 million rand from Services SETA.
300 million rand for printing and branding exercises over a number of years.
Correct. And new investigations that we are conducting we see where and on what they spend that money. Vehicles, properties, the typical, you have got a lot of money, so I must get rid of it, spend it on property, spend it on luxury
Are these
vehicles.
the service providers who got this money? So recently we've started to uncover that this money wasn't to run the business, but it went into buying luxury goods and homes and properties and cars for...
Yeah, only a very small percentage went back into
the business,
as capital for the business.
The typical picture of corruption. So in those tenders, what was it? Marked up, inflated pricing?
It was heavily inflated. We found that some of the products were marked up by 8,000%.
Wow!
And
for T-shirts
and during that time, the oversight on those contracts should have been done by the board, by the chairperson of the board, by the CEO, by the CFO, but they just all signed off on the evaluation process as well as on the approval for payment. Mr. Mahambi, Mr. Nongogo, Mr. Matsebe, they should have.
So who's Mr. Mahambi? Was he the chairperson?
He was the chairperson of the accounting authority, currently the chairperson of the Sunral board for a second term.
So this is the same Mahambi who's the chairperson of Sanral?
That's correct, yes.
Temba Mahambi?
That is correct.
Wow. So, my goodness. And there we're having to uncover things like board overreach and serious conduct at Sanral. So you say, when you start joining the dots here, and this Temba Mahambi was appointed by Blatant Zamandi, wasn't he, at Sanral and at Services?
Correct. Mr. Mahambi came, through the services or the SETA sector. He was previously the administrator of construction SETA, then the chairperson of the accounting authority of services SETA. And when Minister Nzimande was moved to be the Minister of Transport by former President Zuma, he immediately appointed Mr. Mahambi as the chairperson of Sunral in 2018 or 17. And his appointment was renewed by Minister Fikile Mbalula recently.
Sure, and Sanral has a lot of money to spend as well. So let's get back to the services SETA thing. So you say the CEO, CFO, chairperson, everybody's looking away while these grossly overpriced tenders, manipulation, and spending is taking place. Takes us years to get this information. So that's the first red flag, is when a department doesn't want to share with us information, which we rightly are entitled to because we are the citizens, we pay the taxes. We start smelling a rat. But you never let go. So you kept digging and digging. And this is, I think, is one of the successes of OUTA is its resilience to just stay the course, because as over time, the digital fingerprints and the evidence and the joining of the dots gets bigger and bigger, and the picture gets painted more clearly. So what happened after that?
What we basically did, I think, a bit unconventional. Instead of looking at the contracts themselves, in depth, we started to follow the service providers, where they went, where did they go, because we saw the trend with this same company, the same individuals being appointed 3 times in a row to do the same work for Services SETA. And we followed them and their business associates, and we could see that they were appointed at other SETAs as well. And later on, when Mr. Andile Nongogo went to NSFAS, the same group of people were also appointed at NSFAS.
NSFAS, this is the National Students' AIDS Finance Scheme.
That's correct. And
that's been in the news for a lot over the last couple of years.
For all the wrong reasons, yes.
Yeah. And so Andile Nongogo was appointed there as the CEO by Blatant Zamande.
As well, yeah.
Again, okay.
And these service providers basically followed him.
Okay. So this network just grows, and it would seem, as you were saying, this network's providing similar services to other SETAs. Wow. Okay.
So I think one thing that I just want to mention is that the problem that we are sitting with, one of the biggest problems, is transparency from the services or from the SETA side or from institutions reporting to the Department of Higher Education. Mm-hmm. We have launched a lot of, written a lot of letters and asked for information. And then we have to go on to a PIA application. And then we have to go on to an internal appeal. And most of those PIA requests ended up with the information regulator. So it is taking us, a lot of time, a year or more, just to get the information.
Yeah. So there, Rudie, we see it so often in government is that's where you start to realize there's something untoward. We've always said transparency is the enemy of corruption. And when a department does as much as it can to not be transparent about spending, the red flags start being raised. And they do everything they can not to give us the information. They slow us down, but we're not going away. And this picture got so big that eventually, I think Nandile Ngogo was fired from NSFAS.
Correct. And if we had this information and if there was action taken on this information, on our reports, on the Werksmans reports, the two reports from Werksmans, the one on services SETA, the one on NSFAS, if it was acted on earlier and quicker, the problem would not have been, escalating the way it was. One thing that I want to add there is that every time when we looked at different irregularities at different institutions reporting to higher education, and we give out our reports, it is being doubted by the institution. And then they will appoint a new firm to look into our work. And 99% of the time, they came up with the same results and findings. And only then they start to act. What we saw at Services SETA, and that is one of the reasons why they were grilled in Parliament last week, is because 18 months they are sitting on that report now. 18 months.
18 months ago, they got a Werksmans report that was extremely damning around the gross maladministration, irregularities, potential corruption happening in Services SETA. The management, the board, and everyone sit on that for 18 months and do nothing. And yet there's compelling evidence in there that should have seen, for instance, the CFO held accountable as far as we're concerned.
Yes, absolutely. And one thing that's interesting is that we've talked about the previous board, or let's call it the previous administration at Services SETA under Mohammed. Yeah. The new administration, the new board under Mr. Stephen de Vries, I think they are just as guilty as the previous administration or the previous leadership, because they had all the evidence, they had all the reports, they had all the findings, they had the recommendations, but they sat on it, they did nothing. And people that were implicated in those reports are still employed there, while the whistleblowers that came to see us back in 2018 are still without jobs because they were fired because they blew the whistle.
My God. So that's the sick situation that happens. The good people get fired and the bad people stay on. And the inaction, the lack of consequences, the lack of holding people to account by the very people in positions of authority just continues to linger on and on. And I think to your point, we've made this information available to all the authorities, right up to the minister. At the time, Blatant Zamande, we just often would see responses via the media. We found nothing untoward, and Nandile Ngogo was okay. And only to find 6 months later, the heat is too much. They have to fire him. But that's not good enough because there's no charges. The individual probably will find his way back into another government position. He should probably be declared a delinquent director as far as we're concerned. And if the authorities were doing their job in defending the interests of the society, the public, they would be doing far more, but yet no one is held accountable. Even Ernest Causer, the chairperson of NSFAS, we had those recordings that were leaked to us. There's so much obvious links to stuff and conversations with service providers that shouldn't be happening, conflicts of interest. Nothing happens. He's allowed to resign. By the way, he's still the chairperson of the Civil Aviation Authority in South Africa.
That's correct. And I think if you go back a decade or so, from the time when former Minister Blatant Zamande was appointed in 2009, and you look at the decade that he spent at higher education, you will find that no bad guys were ever held accountable. The good guys were fired because they spilled the beans and they blew the whistle. There was no accountability for the past decade at higher education institutions. And that is why it escalated into such I almost want to say, from a bad point of view, a profitable business for them, because nobody will be or was held to account, and nobody would have been held to account.
Well, things are changing now, but before we get there, Rudie, so this manipulation of tenders you've seen quite a lot of that in your investigations in many of the SETAs. It's not just services SETA. I think recently we've seen gross abuse of power at the insurance SETA, that's known as in-SETA, where companies are under financial strain because of the bullying that takes place by management. In-SETA was one of those SETAs that appointed QI Solutions, which was also applied at other SETAs, a grossly overpriced systems developer, which we get feedback doesn't even work properly.
Yeah, I think what we see here is, a kind of a carbon copy of what happened before. You will see new networks are starting to form. The same service providers will be appointed by different SETAs. The same problems that we had previously, overpriced, underperformance, will happen again. And these people are protected, as these service providers. As soon as they, the heat is on, they will be appointed at another SETA as well. So I think, it's a kind of a deja vu that we are seeing here.
Yeah.
The same things happening again. And we also saw that, that this group, like I've said before, was also appointed at NSFAS. So it is not only contained to the SETAs, but it's also at NSFAS, it's also at the National Skills Fund, all the big institutions reporting to higher education.
My goodness. So higher education's got these big pots of different areas, and we've seen it as well, universities, TVET colleges, systems being put in there. Same modus operandi. It is a case of when you join the dots and you just see these glaring obvious red flags all over the place. To us, if we put this on a map, it would be in flames with the extent of the maladministration and corruption that's taking place.
We call on the SIU, or we will get into contact with the SIU. We've got a lot of information on the National Skills Fund. There are previous reports, just like Werksmans put out reports. There's a Nexus report that came out some years ago on the National Skills Fund, where they discovered 5 billion rand worth of irregularities in tender processes. So it is. I'm very, very delighted about the fact that the SIU will step in, especially now at the National Skills Fund as well.
And Andy Mativi and his team, under-resourced, doing a great job. Imagine if they could double their size and how much work we could get in the criminal justice system done. So really, if we just look at this, to me, higher education under the last administration is just a cesspool of wasted money, maladministered, corruptly spent, suppliers getting millions and millions of rands, which never intended for the purposes that services SETA or the SETAs are there. I imagine the new minister, Nabuhle Nkabane, wants to try and sweep clean. That's what I'm getting the feeling from where we sit and speaking to people who understand. But I also get the sense that she's probably overwhelmed by the extent. I mean, where do you start? Because you can't not do anything. You certainly can't leave some of these people in their current positions who are still, as far as we can hear, plundering away. What did you advise the minister to do?
Yeah, first of all, I can believe that the minister is overwhelmed. What we have seen, from OUTA's point of view and from OUTA's side and investigated, it is a huge pool of corruption, the higher education department. But it's not, such a big problem, because there are credible reports that came out, done by reputable firms, done by ourselves, who did a very good investigation, who put out a report. Yeah. So I think that the minister can start there and say, listen, this work has already been done. We're looking at the Nexus report, the Werksmans reports. There are a few of these reports, some of them even commissioned by Blatant that's got good information. And like I've said before, nobody was held to account on those reports. So I think that should be a good starting point for and a good platform for the new minister.
I always wear my business hat, understanding coming out of the business world, when you find something wrong, you deal with it. You deal with it swiftly. You go deep. You get the issue hold their disciplinary hearings, have them dismissed, lay the charges, and just throw the book at people, because you cannot have in the business world people stealing from your shareholders. And in this case here, we have people wasting taxpayers' money, the shareholders, you and I, not the government. The government are the conduit through which all this work is supposed to be done. So we do look to the minister, we look to Parliament to start taking action. And it just astounds us that with all this evidence, with all these reports, with all this information, there's still no action. I mean, it's not rocket science. If you take those reports and get the evidence from them, you can have hearings tomorrow and then replace those people with people that aren't corrupt, who have good backgrounds, who have the ability to do the jobs, replace the boards. Yeah, it just the mind boggles. It is extremely frustrating. We sit here today now, 3-4 months into the new administration. So we hope and believe, sincerely do, unless the minister shows us otherwise, that she is intending to deal with these matters, that she is going to go and do this work. And hopefully she does engage with OUTA and others. It's not just us. There's a lot of information out there to start sweeping clean, to deal with the rot. And it's not going to go away on its own. It has to be pushed. And I've always said, if we're going to fight corruption, you have to fight it. You can't negotiate it. You can't collaborate it out. You can't have quiet diplomacy around corruption. People are acting in the way they shouldn't be. They should be removed. Deal with their fight. Deal with their attempts to try and get back into the business through their court processes. But remove them where the evidence is strong.
Yeah, I cannot agree with you more. I think if we look at what happened with Andile Ngobo and Ernest Khoza, it's going to take years before we maybe will see them in orange overalls, but they are not in the system anymore. So they cannot, manipulate the system anymore. And I think that's the first step.
Yeah.
Is that to act against the people that were implicated, especially in these reports that we were talking about, remove them out of the system so that the system can be healthy and become healthier, and that the system can work, that the evaluation process is done in accordance with supply chain management policies, in line with treasury regulations. Then we will see, less of these irregularities. And that will be the starting point. Just remove the people out of the system.
And then charge them, because a new person going in can get access to all the digital fingerprints that are there and to get the evidence into the right hands quickly and have them held accountable.
Yes, and I think the other thing that must be mentioned is that, the minister cannot get operational, hands on the work itself. So she relies on who she appoints. And it's time now for all these SETAs to get new boards. Services SETA will get a new board in March 2025. So the selection process for boards and for chairpersons of boards that must take the lead must be thorough. There must be a thorough due diligence done on the candidates. The NSFAS board, the minister said that she's going to appoint a new board by the end of this year. And I truly hope and I believe that she will she did her homework, and that whoever she chose to serve on those boards will be people with integrity, with high ethical values, that will put the institution first, right, and not look the other way when there are people that get busy with these irregularities.
Yeah, I agree with you, Rudie. I hope Minister Nkabane does heed our call. She reaches out. We will help. We need her help. She needs the help of the criminal justice system, everybody. She can, the people, the good people inside the systems and civil society. So let's end on that note. I think if I look back and looking into what we found in the higher education, I would almost advocate that there's enough here that's gone wrong for the president to call for a commission of inquiry into higher education over the last 10 years. I'm going to leave it there because I think there's something that we need to push for in that regard. And keep up the good work. Well done. I mean, this is resilience. This is great investigation work. This is good reporting on your behalf and the team. Thank you. Keep it up. Looking forward to the next episode and the next discussion we have on what is coming out of the work that's being done in the anti-corruption unit at OUTA. Well done.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.